Hello, Phil Buchanan, Chairman of Cannon Financial Institute with the May edition of the Cannon Curve. Today I'm excited to welcome two personal and professional friends to the show. First is John Pierce. John Pierce is principal of John Pierce Consulting. He's former head of recruiting for Stiefel, former head of recruiting for Ameriprise, as well as having been a former regional director for Merrill Lynch. John, welcome to the Cannon Curve.
Hey, thanks, Phil. Do I need to wear this during the podcast?
I think you're okay. I think we're good with social distancing today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, excited to have you here. Another longtime pal, both on the personal and professional level, that's with us is Jay Hummel. Jay is partner and co-founder of Wealth Advisor Growth Network, WAGN for short. Prior to that, he has run personal financial services distribution for American Century, and he was also a managing director and head of strategic initiatives for InvestNet. Jay, welcome to the Curve.
Hey, thanks, buddy. Good to see you.
It's good to see you. So both of you guys come from very unique perspectives. You're focused on growth in the advisor network. You've been responsible both for recruiting advisors. So there are two key themes that I want us to examine today, and I'll go ahead and lay out the themes, and then we'll get into the questions. The first key theme is this. In 2008 and 2009, we saw massive amounts of advisor movement, firm to firm, channel to channel. There are some that say that in the second half of 2020 and 2021, we may see a similar type of recruiting movement going on. Do you think that's going to happen? If so, why? If not, why not? Second thing I'd like for us to examine is when you think about homes for advisors that are running advisory practices. You've got the full service channel, you've got the independent channel, you've got bank broker dealer channel, you've got the RIA, you've got a myriad of other options. Where do the two of you see the greatest growth occurring in the years to come, and where do you think the greatest shrinkage is going to come? So, John Pierce, we're going to start with you. 2008, 2009, massive amounts of advisor movement. You were right in the midst of that. You were one of the recruiting gurus at that point in time that were out talking to advisors and working to convince them to make a transition. Are we going to see a repeat of that second half of 2020 and into 2021?
Yeah, that was a very, very fun time in our careers if you were in the recruiting world. And I actually do think it's going to repeat itself. We're already starting to see movement, and despite the global pandemic, you're seeing firms like Ameriprise and Ray J and LPL and Cetera onboard people weekly in this environment. And so I'm a big data-driven kind of person. And I think if you examine the data, especially from discovery data, you get to see that the movement that happened in 08, 09, everyone thought that they were getting their fair share. But the reality is most of the movement happened in the indie space, not the wirehouse space. And my sense is that's a trend that is probably going to continue as advisors are recapping, as advisors are looking for firms that have the technology to truly work from home.
Okay. So, Jay Hummel, do you concur with John's assessment on that? I know that your experience has been in a slightly different space, focusing predominantly, at least recently, in the RIA space. John makes a point that technology is going to drive a lot of advisor decisions. How do you see it playing out? Are we going to repeat 08, 09?
I think we will. And I think part of it, I think there's a lot of macro trends that are the same as 08, 09 and maybe slightly different. You know, succession is something that we've talked about in the industry for a very, very long time. And I think it's now finally coming to roost when you look at these advisors who now have gone through a second hit. They went through it in 08, 09. They're now 10 years older. And so I think we're going to see, especially in the RIA space, sort of this forced transition where succession, when you look at the average age of the RIA being 59 or 60 today, I think succession is now finally demographically at the forefront. I also think there's been the talks of the death of the $100 million advisor. Mark Hurley started that conversation, 12 to 15 years ago. They're never, ever going to make it. I do think what happened in the last 6 weeks is finally technology is one piece that John mentioned, but I think it's being a part of something bigger. I think what we're hearing is size finally matters, that people feel like in the environment of uncertainty that's coming in the next 3 to 5 years, whether it's tech, whether it's scale, whether it's market volatility, you're starting to see these small sort of tuck-in advisors that wanted to do it on their own starting to look for size because they're starting to believe that size actually does matter.
Okay. So, John Pierce, the issue on size mattering, that was a conversation that you and I have had for years as advisors were thinking about where they if they make a move and where they go if they do make a move. You mentioned that you see the indie space really being a major play for advisors in the months and years to come. Are there going to be 3 or 4 winners, or is it going to be a larger consortium of firms that are successful in that space?
And I completely concur with Jay. He mentioned the average age of late 50s. If you look at the average age of traditional wirehouse in large regional firms, it's in the mid 60s. So yeah. I completely concur with Jay on that from a succession planning standpoint. And look, advisors are, especially in the major regional and wirehouse space, they're going to look for a transition and then a sunset. And understand that in the RIA space, the indie space, when you make that sunset, it's capital gains, right? It is not ordinary income. And I think advisors are getting savvy to the fact that when they sunset within a W-2 structure, it's not very tax efficient. So I completely concur with Jay. The reason I think you're going to see the consolidation in 2 spaces, actually. I think the smaller indie/RIA firm that's got 25 to 100 advisors, I believe they're going to be consolidated into larger organizations. I don't think they have the scale, the legal capacity, the regulatory capacity, the capital capacity to remain so small. And so I think there's going to be some consolidation there. And I also think that when you think about work from home, it's now dawning on people that, you know what, I don't need to pay 50 cents on the dollar for stuff I can get off the shelf elsewhere. And I could actually maybe only pay 25 cents on the dollar. So I think Jay is totally right. The big winners, to answer your question directly, you have to really think that the firms that are recruiting today are going to be the big winners. LPL has done a masterful job of having multi-channel options. Raymond James has done a masterful job of having multi-channel options, as has Ameriprise and Cetera. So I think those are the 4 big winners. And again, Jay is, I think, totally right about advisors wanting to tuck in and be part of a community, but also not have to pay the toll of 50 cents on the dollar from a wirehouse or broker, regional broker dealer.
I would agree with that. I live in a little bit of a different world, as you mentioned, Phil, than John does. I spend a lot of time in the RIA space. I think the real winners in that space are going to be your super regional firms. It used to be people 10 years ago were talking, even 5 years ago, were talking about aggregators, right? They were talking about the dynasties, the Focus, the Hightowers, but obviously still doing deals. But the major players today are these super regional RIAs that are out actually being able to get deals done. And what they're doing an extremely good job of is they're replicating the IBD or the bank model, where they're offering full service and capabilities, great technology. Firms don't want to just join companies anymore that only focus on managing money, right? 10 years ago, that used to be the argument. Come, we'll help manage the money extremely well. You go out and serve your clients. Now people are looking for full insurance platforms. They're looking for banking capabilities in the space. And so that's obviously, as you know, Phil, why we built Elk River, launched in the pandemic in Denver, is our belief is the super regionals are going to win. And we actually believe the IBDs, many IBD advisors that are small to mid-sized, John, to your point, are going to look at cost. And I think they're going to look at these super regional RIAs that can provide scale and capacity and do it for a cheaper payout or a cheaper grid. I think a lot of your small IBD guys are going to, and women are going to be looking to leave that IBD space as it's too expensive for a firm that's mostly advisory today, where they used to be mostly commission. So I see a lot of IBD transition that small space to the RA world. I'm anxious to see if that kind of goes upstream over the next 5 years.
So if I distill down what I'm hearing from both of you, the large IBD space, John, you see that continuing to be a choice for smaller IBD players, both firms as well as advisors. Jay, you naturally see the same, but you see the larger RIAs being a home there. So if we say that the RIA space is a winner, if we say that large IBDs are winners, are there any other winners? And then who are the losers? Where are we going to see shrinkage? Jay, you go first here.
Anything that doesn't have scale, to our point, I think you're going to continue to see the consolidation. We've already seen it, obviously, in the BDs, but I think your regional, smaller, independent broker dealers are going to have a challenge. I don't think their model is going to scale well in what we're going to, where they have to cut cost and provide more services. Generally, those things are mutually exclusive and they're tough to do. So I think, again, size is going to matter, whether you're talking IBD space or RA space. Going forward, I think these small to mid-sized players that 10 years ago were considered large aren't considered large today. I think the small regional IBDs are in trouble.
It's an interesting question. When you look at the wirehouse space, you're starting to see, reversion to the mean with Wells Fargo as an example. So a multi-channel option, beginning to recruit heavily, fixing mistakes of the past. While they're still bleeding advisors, my sense is, they're in a growth mode. So firms that are not in a growth mode, I think, are at risk. I think you'll continue to see the swapping of advisors with, Merrill Lynch, and Morgan Stanley, and UBS is unique in the sense that it doesn't seem like they are that concerned about their shrinkage of the advisor force. So I'm not really sure what the Swiss plan long-term is, but in the super regional space, it's interesting to see what will happen if there's no growth and retirements, loss of FAs. Some of these firms that are 1,000 to 2,000 may get scooped up and consolidated. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens the next, call it 3 years. My sense is, the number of super regionals will shrink and move to different platforms. You're seeing Merrill just, again, continue to hire to the Merrill Edge side, the mass affluent side, and the headcount numbers at Merrill are inflated because of all their hiring. The traditional channel has been shrinking each year. So I don't see any really big winners in the space that I play in.
I got you. So one final question for each of you. And it came to me as Jay was talking about the fact that so many advisors, the focus years ago was just on, join us, we'll manage the money for you. We'll focus on investment management. But today, I think there's a much greater focus, as Jay talks about, on ensuring that you've got the right planning tools available, you've got the right insurance platforms available, you've got the right banking products available. I saw some comments that Gorman of Morgan Stanley put out not long ago. He was commenting on Morgan Stanley advisors vis-a-vis other independent advisors and other RIAs. And he talked about that Morgan Stanley advisors had a greater share of the financial life of their client than did many of these independents and RIAs. What are the trends that you see happening that are going to grow an RIA's ability to encapsulate the total financial life of the client? Same question, I guess, on the independent side. John, why don't you take that first?
Sure. And again, the wirehouse space has for years, tried to increase their share of wallet of clients, and I'm not really sure if James's comments are indicative of reality in terms of share of wallet. I think that, this global pandemic has really showed the firms that can take care of their associates and can take care of their clients. And so the firms that have the technology to truly facilitate work from home, the firms that have aggregation tools for clients to look at their total life easily, the firms that have the ability to offer solutions, not just in financial planning, but actually implementing the financial plans. That's the big Achilles heel in most financial plans is the implementation, because everyone knows they need to do things. They don't actually implement over time. And I think the firms that have the ability to actually implement, and Jay kind of alluded to this earlier, they have the tools that every client needs for their entire life and next generation. Those are the firms that are going to win. Everyone claims they have them, Phil. I think the global pandemic has really shown the firms that truly have invested in the past in both technology and solutions, and work from home has kind of laid bare the firms that have it.
Jay, what say you?
Yeah, I mean, in the RIA space, Bill, I love the Morgan Stanley example because it shows the three things Morgan does well that independent advisors in the RIA space don't. And one, why does Morgan Stanley's advisors have greater share of wallet? One, they have a wider service menu. Back to what we talked about, they provide a lot of things to clients. Second thing they do is that advisor is not focused on anything other than bringing new clients in and servicing his or her clients. They're not focused on CRM. They're not focused on billing administration. They're not focused on what the next tech tool is. The Morgan Stanley does that for them. And so in the RIA space, people get enamored and they run their own RIA and they think they have to spend all that time running the business instead of actually supporting clients. And the third piece is the Morgan Stanley advisor gets paid, revenue share on all those services that come. And so many RIAs are making a mistake where they only charge a client on billable assets for AUM. And they have all these great services now that are open architecture to them in the lending space and the insurance space, where they could actually serve their client better and actually make more revenue doing it, but they don't. And so I think I love the Morgan example is because it shows the three things that the wire does well that many RIAs in the independent space are not.
So if I said that was the last question, but I've got one final one. You are approached by an advisor that is 50 years old. He or she says, I've got 200 million AUM. I am investment centric at this point in time. I want to work until I'm 65 and then sunset the deal. Not naming firms, but focused on channels. What would be your one piece of advice to them? John Pierce.
I think too often advisors make moves for the wrong reasons. And I would tell them that during their due diligence, you have to find a place where you feel comfortable and happy for you and your family. And I think that most advisors in the wirehouse, large national or regional firms, they tend not to look at the space that Jay's in, or they tend not to look at the super OSJ spaces where they could tuck in and, as Jay mentioned, use all the services that are available. So I would encourage them to widen their focus and not just think about moving from wire to wire or wire to regional, and really do your due diligence on the independent space, on the hybrids, on the super OSJs, and then also the RIA space, because that is clearly growing and a good fit for the right entrepreneurs.
Jay.
Yeah, that advisor can't go independent on their own. 200 million is just too small in today's world. So I agree. I would tell them to tuck in somewhere or be affiliated somewhere. But the thing that I think oftentimes advisors don't understand is they got to find a platform that's right for the kind of client that they serve. If they're serving ultra high net worth individuals, that's a very different customer than a small retail customer that may be 50% insurance and 50% asset based. So I would just encourage them to really think about what do their clients need and make sure that they pick a platform that's in line with that.
Fantastic commentary from both of you. Jay Hummel, partner and co-founder of Wealth Advisor Growth Network. Thank you for being part of the show today. John Pierce, principal of John Pierce Consulting. Thank you for being part of the conversation. A great debate, great insight on where you see the business transitioning in the days and weeks to come. Thanks for your time today. I hope both of you remain safe and healthy. This has been the Cannon Curve for May of 2020. The Cannon Curve is a production of Cannon Financial Institute. Executive producer of the Cannon Curve is Sarah Jones. Editing and mixing is done by Dan Mansky. Until next month, I'm Phil Buchanan, wishing you the very best.